Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I am back with more chess action, and last week I was out playing the Portuguese First League of the 2025-2026 season for my club, Vitória Sport Clube. And as you can see there, we actually got a sort of legendary fifth place for the club, which is really cool. So the Portuguese League is a 10-team event, and it takes place like continuously throughout 1 week here in the summer in Portugal. This edition was in this small village called São Pedro do Sul, which is like in the sort of northern interior part of Portugal. But anyways, this was a really cool and historic sort of milestone for our club, because usually we are fighting not to get relegated, because the bottom 3 teams, so like the 10th, 9th, and 8th place, get relegated to the 2nd division. But this year, that was never really that much in question, and we actually got our very first fifth place. As for me, I was playing for the 4th board, and I was usually the 4th and 5th board rotate. What that means is that the teams here in Portugal play in 4 boards. Each team brings 4 or 5 players, or even more, but only 4 can play at a time. And so when you bring 5 people, usually the 4th and 5th rotate, which means like sometimes one guy plays, sometimes the other plays. So that's what happened between me and my teammate Pedro Gil. Okay, so let's get to the games. Round 1, I didn't play, which was, even if I were to play, it would be quite challenging, since the freaking bus arrived at like 3:20 or something. So and the game started at 3 o'clock. So that would have been a bit difficult. But I did play in the second game against a 2100. I ended up playing 5 games, and we're going to take a look at 4 of them. So here we were playing Colégio Afanor, and I was playing a 2100 player. Okay, I went for the King's Indian. And okay, against low-rated players, I've been playing this line with Knight D7, because if they are really inclined to make a draw, I am not exactly sure what black can do. I mean, sure, there are some wins and so on, even like historic wins in the past, but to be honest, if someone is well prepared there, I'm not sure I can get anything. So I usually go for this line with Knight D7 and E5, Bishop E3, and H6. Okay, so I decided to go for this idea. There are other interesting moves here in this position. The King's Indians nowadays are very much, rich. I believe that before they used to be, like the paths used to be more narrow and people would play the same things over and over again. Nowadays, with the help of the engines, like a lot of new things are possible. Queen E7 is also a move. Also A6, I believe. Okay, I went for H6. It's sort of a waiting move, but it also prepares Knight G4, right? And doesn't allow any Bishop G5s, which is usually White's response. Okay, my opponent went deep into the tank and made a mistake here. So White can do a couple of things. It's probably best not to relieve the tension, although it's always possible. But if he were to go for D5, okay, I can go Knight G4 and F5. I can also prepare that a bit and start with A5. Depends on what I want to do. For example, I can go E5, and if White goes Knight D2, this is usually like a good setup for White. But I also have my play. I can go Knight H7 and push this pawn. It's probably best for White to do something else, like Rook E1. Or even H3. Okay, he goes Knight D2, which is a bit of an odd move. And immediately, this is one of the things with chess, like one of the most important things is pattern recognition. And immediately when he played Knight D2, I could just feel like something seems off because of this pawn on D4. Now it's very tender. And also, in these King's Indians, when you take, like if I were to take on D4 here, White always 100% of times recaptures with the knight and establishes like this pawn here and this sort of steady formation. Instead, he goes Knight D2 and allows me to take. So immediately, for example, I realize that I can take, and this should be sort of, not too bad for black, let's say, because the knight on D2 is just outright misplaced. So I can definitely play something like this. But still, the character of the position didn't change that much, even though he has one misplaced piece. But I realized I have better, and I go Knight G4, a neat little tactic. So Knight G4, and Okay, let's keep going. I had to stop the recording for a second because I wasn't sure the mic was picking up, but it is. Okay, so knight g4, neat little tactic, as I was saying. And I just want to take on d4, right? So, he has to go for bishop g4 here. Everything else is just a crime because I'm taking this beautiful bishop on e3 and damaging his pawn structure. So he has to go for this. We get this, and he takes here. I spent a lot more time thinking about bishop takes h6, actually. Okay, so basically this is a fork, right? And he has to give one of his pieces back. And again, he doesn't want to damage his own structure, so he's going to sacrifice the bishop somewhere. I thought he was going to go for bishop h6, and I was trying to think about lines like this, where my pawn can get kind of weak, and I don't have access to c5 because I'm dropping this one. Also don't have access to queen f6 because I'm dropping this one. And okay, I was just trying to make sure that the pawn would stay alive for some time. For example, I was thinking about this, bishop g7, he can go like knight somewhere, putting more pressure, and eventually I will drop the pawn, but I will have my counterplay as well with ideas like knight c5, right? Opening up an attack on this pawn, so like trade, and then take on e4. If he wants to defend it, I can go d3, opening up this bishop. And okay, I was just trying to make sure everything is in order. Okay, he ends up taking on d4, queen c2, rook e8. So around this point, I have a very comfortable position. You could call this like, let's say, dream king's Indian. But the position is still rather equal-ish. And I don't have that much to work with, let's say. Only like the dark squares. This unopposed bishop is really a monster, right? Okay, eventually I decide to relieve this sort of pin tension type thing and trade off the bishop pair. Of course, I would love to keep it, but I wasn't finding a way. Around here, I'm just horsing around a bit. Knight f4. I go back. I go to c5. I was taking a look at the game, and I'm not even sure why I went for all of these things, but I guess there was a reason. Okay, rook e6. Now I'm just doubling up, tripling up even, putting pressure on the pawn. But unfortunately, okay, it's not enough, right? I cannot really, like, let's say, take the pawn or break through or something. Why wasn't f5 a move? I'm trying to figure that out now. Because I was thinking about this all the time. I believe he would just double up, right? And then I was worried about some f4 and e5 at some point, I believe. So okay, I went for bishop b4. Again, I was taking a little bit of time. I wanted to play fast, but it's always difficult because that's something that happens. That's one of the reasons why I prefer like blitz and rapid nowadays. Like you don't get caught up in all these annoying details. For example, like I want to play bishop b4. Why? Because I want remove the defender and take the freaking pawn. Just a straightforward idea. And then after some time, I noticed he has this random move, queen e3, attacking both these pawns. And I can't really defend both. And so I just get caught up in this and start, burning time. Eventually, I can't even quite remember what I was going to do. Of course, if I want to just dry out the game, I can take the knight, take the pawn, and he takes one of these, and we'll just have to draw. But of course, I don't want to draw. Okay, he goes rook e1, thankfully. a5, rook e3. Yeah, and around this point, he started to go wrong because, sure, this spin is annoying, but you know what? The problem is that I don't have enough resources here to, put more pressure and make him crack. So I wasn't really sure what my next move was going to be. But that's the thing with these sort of annoying passive positions for the opponent. He doesn't feel comfortable, and he might start to go wrong. So he goes for this, shuffling with the rooks. But it's wrong because now this rook is just offside. So queen e7, rook f4, bishop b4 back. And around here, he's starting to really crumble. Because eventually I'm going to go f5 or d5. And this spin is going to allow me to just take the pawn for free. So I was just trying to set that up. I go rook e5. Probably it was better to just go g5 immediately. For example, here I can just win the pawn immediately. Because I'm relying on this. Well, here I even have h5, which I wasn't seeing for some reason, but I just have f5 as well, and I win the full rook because of the spin. So what he has to do instead is like rook f5, and I'll take here and we'll trade everything. And okay, go down to an endgame like this. Sure, it's much better for black, probably winning, but I didn't want to. I mean, I felt that I could play for more, like more than even taking a pawn. And I felt like the knight here would be kind of annoying, playing around these weak and light squares. But rook e5 was probably a bit too slow, because I missed some resources that he will have. So he starts with h4, d5. Computer says it's better to go f5, but okay, I didn't want to weaken my king. So d5, take, f3. Now apparently he could go knight e3 and something like this. Okay, I didn't consider this at all. You know, my philosophy is just like, give me the pawn and, you know, I'll think later. I expected f3 and I calculated this out, but as I said, I missed, like from afar, I missed some resources that he would have. Namely, there's two. He can take on g5. That's what he did, takes, and now he gains access to this fork, gets the rook back. Okay, and he also has f4 immediately, which is interesting. I don't have time to like move the rook anywhere because he takes here with check. So instead I must take his rook. This is what was, let's say, where I was spending more time thinking about. But honestly, like I didn't think this would be any good for him because now I'm already up a pawn, right? 3, 5 against 4, and I'm gonna get a second one. And he can't really defend it, but the computer just calls this equal. I guess my king is too weak and he'll find some perpetual sort of nets. Okay, I thought about this for more time. Takes. I get this f takes e4. Cat is meowing. That's fine. Queen d5. Now queen h5. He takes. And okay, I was trying to obviously find some kind of forced win with checks and stuff here because it feels like something is about to crumble. For example, I can take an exchange like this, check. Now he has to go to g1, I thought, because if he goes to h2, I will probably play rook e6, right? So stop this check, and now I'm just swinging the rook over with mate. If he takes, I take here with check, which is quite an important detail. So I thought he would have to go to g1, and I can take an exchange like this, bishop c5. Just a simple distraction or decoy or whatever. And then I take his rook. But I was really like heavily unsure about this position, like king h8. And here's something like queen f7 or queen d6 or like pawn e6. I mean, the knight is the king's best defender. That's what everyone says. And here, yeah, my king is too weak, even though I got an exchange. So after some consideration, I went for queen e5, which turns out to be an unfortunate blunder. So I'm up a pawn, his king is weak, I have the bishop, I have two passed pawns. Okay, it doesn't matter. None of that matters. Chess is a concrete game, right? I had to stick with the rook. Let's see why. He goes 93. And only now did I realize that there are, again, concrete issues. Namely, if I go d4, which I did, he can take and go knight g4. And the whole problem with this is that if I move the rook somewhere, not to e8, which gets forked immediately, but like to e6, which is the most natural square, he can take. Okay, he can take and set this fork up. And here I'm probably not winning, but there isn't enough material left. Okay, I realized this back here when he played 93, but I missed a crucial, like I miscalculated something because I thought that I can go d3 and now the pawn will queen. So like he doesn't have to take this rook because I take here and I promote. But he takes this pawn, right? And I take, he gives a check, this, d2. Bro thinks he's Hikaru, but I'm not because I missed knight f2. Okay, it's just quite simple as well. And now I cannot promote, and like no pieces can get near to help me promote, so that would be just a draw. Okay, eventually I had to improvise, right? I had to improvise, ditch the pawn, I went for this, d3. At least I keep the rooks on, and my rook can help me tremendously to try and promote. So he goes king f3, rook c3 check. I was trying to misplace his king, now rook c1. And I want to promote, and around here, I didn't really see how he could defend. Already I forget what, I mean, he had some defense for sure, but I forget what it was. Maybe it was knight f2 here, but I'm not sure that's gonna work. No, that was gonna be one of my tricks, like this, rook f1, and let's say he defends this with, well, there isn't really any move, but here I could take this one, and bishop c5. He probably has some better defenses along the way. But he ends up going for knight e3, and this is really just lost because I got rook e1. And again, I'm setting up this threat. But, you know, more than that, for example, he sidesteps it here. More than that, I just have this simple threat of bishop c5, which just puts too much pressure on the knight, which has to move, and the knight queen. So I just, you know, caveman-like reinforced my threat. In all fairness, he came up with a pretty interesting resource with rook d7, which doesn't work, but I couldn't see that in the spur of the moment, let's say. The point is, of bishop c5, he wanted to go knight g4. And if you queen here, if you're hasty, this is a draw. This is sort of a well-known motif with the knight and the rook, but it was a really clever find by him. So this is just mate. And if I go the other way, this is just a perpetual, surprisingly enough. But as he told me after the game, instead of queening, I can go for this important check first. And yeah, this will secure the win because now the rook controls this this square. Anyways, so I played king f8 instead of all that, and he just resigned because on the next move again I'm gonna go for bishop c5, and he doesn't have any more of these resources anymore. Okay, so that was my first game. Kind of smooth. You know, there was a hiccup, let's say, there, going into that drawn endgame. But even there, I retained some practical chances and whatnot. Okay, could have been better, but it was a pretty decent game overall. Okay, second game, I was playing a 2200 opponent, someone who I do not like at all. And we went for, I decided to go for the ready because I had some ideas against some systems that he could play. The problem with playing such an open-ended system is that they can go for literally anything. Like anything will be possible for him, will be at his disposal. And okay, of course, I mean, unless this is your main thing, your main repertoire, and you know how to play against every single system, you'll always have some holes here and there in your repertoire. And so this specific move order that he played was one of them for me, this position. So I was expecting to get slightly different things, but not exactly this line, which I know of, but don't know it well at all. So knight d4, he goes knight b6. I go knight b5. Okay, natural enough. So you can see the position is very symmetrical. Bishop d7 and knight c6. I thought he was getting a bit too passive, but it turns out that this is completely fine and sound for black. And bishop f4 already is a step in the wrong direction. So around here, I mean, I was playing rather fast up until this moment, and here I took a long pause because I couldn't really figure out what I was supposed to do, to be honest. I decided to go for the idea that I played in the game, but it turns out that it's kind of BS. And what I should have played, apparently, is bishop e3. So setting up this idea of taking on b6. And I guess I didn't really appreciate... I mean, I still don't fully understand. So he got to take the queen because the bishop is hanging, but he takes the pawn. I'm not sure I can... Even now, I'm not sure I can fully appreciate like the positional aspects of this thing. He still doesn't really have any weaknesses. And yeah, I don't know. I still have to look into this. But again, it's the problem with playing systems that you're not so familiar with. You'll be caught off guard in some stuff. So I decided to go for this idea. Okay, I wanted to lure his rook to the c8 square, and then go bishop g5, in order to then apply this funny looking move with knight d6. Because one of the main problems with my position, you know, is that he's going a6 next, and what the hell am I doing with this knight? It has to go back to a3, and then what? The c4 square is taken, I have to go to c2 or something. It looks dreadful. So I decided to improve the knight like this. But the problem is it's still not that much of an improvement, so I horse around again. It's a pattern that I'm noticing in my game, so I hadn't even thought about that. And here, yeah, I decided to provoke e5, but this is also something that I believe is one of my weaknesses in chess. I'm not very good at evaluating, like, I mean, sometimes your opponent takes up some positional concessions, let's say, but they gain dynamics from it. One of the most notable examples is the isolated pawn. So here I wanted to provoke e5 to shut off his bishop, and I realized that it gives him access to the square with the knight, but I thought that the positional aspects would prevail or something. But as I said, it wasn't that good of an evaluation because the dynamics here were largely in his favor, and he's just gonna take over the game completely in the next couple of moves. And I was relying here, I played bishop e3, which is a mistake, and I was relying on knight c5, basically, on this kind of activity. I mean, I was relying on this back then when I went for this funny little maneuver. When I got to this position, I realized that knight c5 just doesn't do all that much because, again, the dynamics are in his favor. So he can just sack the pawn entirely and, force me to dance around a bit more, just activate all his pieces, and I'm probably screwed at this point. So I realized that here, which was a bit too late, so I should have dropped back to c1, basically, in order to at least expel his knight there. Instead, we get to this point, my position here is extremely tender and difficult. I played b3. Maybe again, I should have just undid my mistake and went bishop c1. I played b3. Knight d2, rook c8. Around this point, he also had quite a big lead on the clock, like 20 minutes or more. And I wasn't happy because I'm playing for a draw, and overall my position just sucks, so I could very easily lose this game. For example, here I had to take a decision that I didn't want to make at all, but if you can't see anything else, so you have to play a move, right? I took it and went knight b1, which is depressive, but knight e4 falls short to f5, and the poor horsey is trapped. So knight b1 had to be played. Okay, he trades, gets the file, and jumps in with the knight. I mean, I expected this crap, but what can you do? For example, he could have went in there. I'm not even sure how I would respond. I was thinking about. I'm not sure what I was thinking about. Just trying to hold. I mean, I can always think about taking, but it's probably just lost because even though he's not, crashing through immediately, he's just going to cement this pawn. And yeah, this one on c3 cannot be held for very long. So he goes for this a4, queen a2. I harass him a bit here. I want to get the queens off the board. I harass this queen. No pun intended. g5. Okay, he's trying to go g4 to disconnect my knights. I go h3, but here he also went astray a little bit. And he could have probably put a lot more pressure on me, but he couldn't really figure out the way here. So f5. I go knight c4, and he goes f4. Yeah, I wasn't really sure what he was trying to do here. And finally, I find this sort of resource, let's say. Well, it's not really a resource, it's just a move with rook d1. And okay, it turns out that he took a bit too long with this thing with the pawn, and now there's no way to defend this one. However, there are some tactics to take into consideration. Okay, he takes. First of all, I thought I could take here, and I spent quite some time looking at this. Eventually, I believe I found something that wins for him, which was to take here, go for this check, and then knight f4 check, and this crap is gonna win. This fourth sequence, because now I cannot take because of this fork. This forkaroo of dreams gets the rook, and if king f3, well, g2, and that's it. And that's a new queen. So I took back, but still everything is golden dandy. Okay, if he goes knight e3, I'll just take, go rook d3, and I'm playing for a win. He goes rook c3. And here, okay, I'm at least proud of this moment because under like big time pressure, like maybe I had like 3 minutes or 2 minutes left or something, I decided to go, stick my hand in the dirt and calculate something that I had seen, like an idea, try to calculate it out, make sure it works. And it did work. And I'm really proud of that. Because usually when you try and calculate things under time pressure, I mean, I always advise people not to go for tactics when you don't have time. It's just a mistake in general. But of course, like if your position demands it, well, you just have to figure it out and hope that your calculations are correct. So what I'm talking about is knight takes d4. Okay, so what was his idea? It was not to just like take here something, because now he doesn't have time to take the pawn. The knight is hanging, and I'm already up a pawn. His idea was to take this one. Okay, so he is eliminating this knight, and now he wants to give me a fork. But my idea was to go for this knight f5, which I was spending my time calculating, and the cat's trying to eat my damn mouse cable. So knight f5, and this is a really beautiful move. Okay, so if I take, let me just get that out of the way. He takes and takes here, and now because of this move knight d4, he ends up winning a piece and the game. But knight f5 is a really nice move. So what this does a couple things. This does 3 things at least. So 1, gets rid of this possibility of the fork. 2, the rook now sees the knight, so he has both these pieces hanging. 3, the only way to save these 2 pieces is to go rook c5, and then my idea is to go for the boom, rook takes d5. Kind of funny that I'm using the same motif that like almost screwed me over in the previous game. I hadn't even noticed that. And now if he takes, okay, I get the thing. Actually, funny enough, once me and a good friend of mine, Bruno Martins, who has also been in the channel, who had a very nice run here in this tournament as well, we were discussing some endgame where, like, in some position like this, even though white is up a pawn, he can be in danger of losing, entirely of losing, because of the activity of the kings and the fact that the bishop, you know, outclasses the knight by so much in this endgame. So sometimes these things can be lost, because like white can end up in some Zugzwang, which is a position where you don't have a move. Your best move would be to pass the turn to the other player. And what I'm talking about is that if the knight moves, the king gains access to this side of the board and just munches up all the pawns. So sometimes these positions can be lost. I was kind of worried about that, but you know, coming from back here, being that I was under so much pressure, you know, you have to take a practical decision, and I'm like, okay, I'm definitely gonna try my luck in an endgame where I'm up a pawn and I might be losing, rather than the position I currently have. So anyways, he didn't go for that. He went for rook c3, and we made a quick draw here after takes, rook d8. I thought briefly about trying to play for win, but first, we were playing a much higher rated team, like on the other boards, and a draw would be immensely good for us. And second, and maybe more importantly, the position is just drawn. And I couldn't really see anything to do. His rook is too active, and the bishop in general will be better than the knight in these endgames. I didn't love this pawn in particular. I didn't think it was going anywhere, and he has this pressure here. Okay, I couldn't find a way to play for a win. So we just made a draw there. All right, so that was a big draw for our team, as I said. So we tied the match 2-2. Then I only played a couple rounds later, and I was playing a 2150 opponent. He goes e4. He had been going e4, and I decided, like, you know what? I'm tired of all these BS openings that I've been playing. I mean, my main repertoire nowadays is the Caro-Kann. And okay, this is just far too freaking solid to play, like, when you're playing below by so much. And what else? I couldn't play the freaking Sicilian because he was playing the Alapin all the time. And in case you didn't know, the Alapin is a guaranteed draw against the Sicilian, as shown by also like a previous game of mine from a couple of years ago. I also cannot go e5, which I sometimes play, because they just go for the 4 knights. And again, welcome to another forced draw. So by exclusion of things, for lack of a better word, I went for the Scandinavian. Okay, I decided to prep this up for a little bit. I know that, you know, lower rated players, I mean, low rated in a, let's say, in a relative sense, don't know how to play against the Scandinavian so well. How do I know that? Because I myself don't know how to play against the Scandinavian so well, and I'm a bit less lower rated than him, if that makes any sense. So let's go. By the way, there's a great course on this on Chessable by Arthur Snakesens, who plays this from time to time. Great opening expert, by the way, and theoretician. He also has a brilliant YouTube channel, which I even recommended in some previous video of mine about the top 10 best chess YouTube channels out there. So c6, bishop c4, bishop f5. This is all the main line, and now he goes for short castles, which is a very modest and sort of shy approach, which I expected because, again, I wasn't expecting him to know that much theory. So what is best? Best is knight e5, putting the pressure on immediately, right? Attacking f7. I have to defend with e6, and now there's two ways. The main line, I'm just gonna show the main line. It's g4. I mean, it's quite aggressive. Again, white has to know his ins and outs in these lines. Bishop g6, h4, and now knight d7, and you go h5, or no, you take first. Knight takes, h5, bishop e4, and now there's this, for example, probably the most famous game from this position is Anand Luthier, like 98 or something in BL. Okay, just one of those, you know, evergreen games where Anand sacrifices the queen or something and delivers mate, and that went rook h3. The main line, in case you want to know, nowadays goes short castles. Any freaking ways. He goes short castles immediately. But this, as I said, is a bit too restrained. So knight d7, a3. Okay, he wants to grab space with d4. I dropped back. By the way, the advantage of playing the Scandinavian, if you suspect your opponent will not play in the most critical ways, is that you just end up with a better Caro-Kann. So this structure, you can definitely, you know, recall it if you play either some variations of the French or more commonly the Caro-Kann or the Slav, for example. And this is just a good version because the bishop is outside the pawn chain. Okay. So knight e2, he's rerouting his knight to greener pastures. I go knight d5 because I believe I wanted to... Why did I play knight d5 in this specific juncture? Oh, for two reasons. So one is that if he drops the bishop back, I could play around with the idea of putting my bishop on d6. I ended up refraining from that. And the second reason is that I stopped knight h4, right? So like knight h4 would be a bit annoying capturing my bishop on f5. Okay, so I decided to go for bishop e7 at the end of the day. Knight g3, bishop back, and now b5. Okay, kind of a thematic move as well. Important to know in this Caro-Kann structure, which again, like comes up all the time if you play the aforementioned openings. And so the point of this move is to stop c4, okay? With that being said, I spent maybe around, I don't know how much time, 7 minutes more thinking about specifically c2 to c4. Because, like, look, I wasn't seeing exactly how he can unblock his bishop. And even though he takes up some positional concessions, like namely the isolated pawn, I believe there are some lines, for example, in the Alapin, where people do this and play against the c6 square. So what he gains in exchange for that is the more active bishop, and okay, rook c1, so on. And I believe he can play against the c6 pawn with like pawn to b4 and whatnot, fixing that pawn in place. By the way, I was just curious to know what the computer thinks. Yeah. He evaluates this as around equal, like very slight advantage to the black side. Okay. Queen e2. I castle. Knight e1. Okay, so now he starts going astray. But to be honest, I wasn't... I mean, it's one of those positions where your opponent has to really think deeply and come up with a good plan. And that wasn't really the case. Again, I haven't analyzed the games that deeply yet, so I don't really know what he can do, but I'm sure that because his position optically looks sound right now, I'm pretty sure that there must be better ways for him than what he played. Okay, knight e1. This is just asking for trouble, right? You know, if your opponent goes backwards, what should you do in general? Okay, strike in the center. That's what I did. So sacrifice this pawn and so on. Just go for that. And he goes f4, which I kind of expected, but I didn't think it was any good. And it turns out, at least in Stockfish language, it isn't good, but it puts quite a lot of pressure on me. So I'm not, you know, I'm not too sure about that. So c5, yeah, just opening up the center. f4, knight f6. So he's threatening f5. That's the immediate threat. Okay, if I just play some move, f5, and he's gonna grab this horsey here. Okay, it's gonna lose its protection, and that's no good. So knight 7 to f6, adding more protection to it. Takes. c4. This was kind of a difficult decision for me. Maybe it shouldn't have been. I mean, if you take one glance at the position, it feels like a move you want to play, just to shut off this bishop forever. It'll take a bunch of time to get back into the game. And overall, black just has so much space and so on. But, you know, his pieces are also kind of uncoordinated, and his king is a bit open. So I wanted to take, in some regards, I wanted to take. Of course, the bishop is hanging right now. And I don't really want to, you know, here it's the opposite. If I were to give that bishop up, because now he has the bishop pair, and he can start to probably just take this pawn and so on. But I was thinking a bit about rook e8 and trying to take on d4 and so on. But eventually I thought that the time I was getting... Also, I'm removing the access to this square, which is kind of vital, and that was his whole idea, to circle around with this knight. So c4. Okay, c3, rook e8. He goes queen f3, because, you know, I'm threatening some discovered attacks. Bishop chops back, bishop goes forward, queen, bishop. Okay, this is maybe one of the critical moments, let's say. I wasn't really sure what to do. Okay, so I was spending my precious time calculating some forced lines. For example, bishop h5 is kind of tricky to meet. If you just drop back automatically, there goes your rook. If you just go to h3 automatically, setting up some BS, bishop g4 happens. And next, he's getting hit with some rook takes e1 in some lines. For example, like here, I believe this worked immediately like this. Take, bishop g4. Double attack. And I am getting 2 pieces for the price of the rook. I was kind of thinking about this position as well. I wasn't sure how bad this was for him. You know, sometimes getting, you know, having the rook for the 2 pieces sometimes is not too bad. But here, I was trying to evaluate it, but of course it should be good in general. At the end of the day, I discarded this in view of queen g3. And what is so annoying about this move is that, okay, I wanted to gain access to knight e4, right? Which looks like such a harmonious move, but queen h4 was annoying me. Okay, queen h4. And now he attacks both these guys. So if I take his bishop, yeah, he's not going to take this one. He's going to take that one. And here, I didn't really like the looks of this. I believe the computer was pointing out that I can go g6 here. It's a bit of a difficult move, in all fairness to myself. Because, I mean, first of all, I'm not threatening anything as of right now, okay? So if he just makes some pass move, I don't want to take, because he'll take here with this nasty discovery check. The point of this move is that I'm preparing to just go either king h8 or knight e4. Maybe knight e4 right now, right? And now the same thing with queen h4 is just not going to work that well, because he cannot take here. So that would have been an interesting option. I mean, quite difficult. But the thing is that apart from that option that the computer provided, I wasn't really sure what to do. Of course, my position is good. It looks good. The pieces are in the right places, but what to do? So I went rook e6, okay? Trying to improve another piece. Cannot blame a man for that. But the computer does. The computer does blame the man for that. It says this is a mistake. Not because of what my opponent played, though. It is a mistake. Okay, if again, for a very difficult sort of reason, like take. Okay, I cannot take with the knight because this guy is dropping. But I take with the rook, and now he wants to go g4. And, I mean, look. Sure, but not many people I know are playing like this. Rook e8, knight g2. You know, the thing is that this is extremely hard to play with white because you have no attack. I mean, this might look threatening and so on, but you're going nowhere. You have no attack with all these pieces defending. Computer just says, I guess, that white is holding his own. Like, there's no way for black to break through, but good luck finding that over a chessboard. So he goes queen h3, which sent me deep into the tank, and I'm not gonna lie, I had around 20 minutes left here. I burned, you know, all my time, and I was extremely afraid of losing around this point because, you know, even though it feels like I've made all the right choices and played just natural moves, all of a sudden he has this very simple plan of going knight f3, knight e5, okay? And once the knight lands on e5, he's grabbing the whole house. Okay. I calculated my brains out, and I played rook e2. And I just took the pawn, closed my eyes. Not really, because I calculated this like a madman. But you can never be sure, to be honest. At least I can't. Maybe Carlsen can. Because look, he has all this horsepower here, like menacing my king. And it kind of feels surreal that he doesn't have some kind of breakthrough, of knockout blow. But he doesn't. Okay, so he takes some time and tries to go for this endgame. I mean, I saw this tactic, but we're just trading pieces. He's not winning anything. And don't forget, I'm up a pawn. This one is weak. And I find this last little move, bishop g7, which is quite nice. And the game is pretty much over. Let's see how it wrapped up. So the problem is that if he takes, again, like the rook on the 7th is too good. I'm up a pawn. The knight is too good, etc., etc. He goes bishop e4 immediately. A bit of a weird move, but I can take here intermezzo, as they say. And here I'm just up 2 pawns, and it's a little bit too much. Okay, so he goes for this, tries to set up some sort of perpetuals. I go h5, give my king some breathing room, a5, and just rook h8. And okay, and he resigned here. He just resigned. It might look a bit weird that he resigned after such a passive move, but the thing is that these pawns are just running through, and they automatically make queens by themselves with the help of the rook. It turns out that I played this game very well. Okay, it turns out that I made a lot of correct decisions, and basically the computer doesn't criticize almost anything I did. I believe like the only thing it says it's a mistake is rook e6. And okay, because of that reason that I showed you, that he could go for the g4 stuff, but if that's the only mistake I make during a chess game, dude, I'm the happiest man alive. So maybe that also speaks a bit to like my confidence in general. Like I should be, have a bigger belief in myself, I guess, in my chess abilities. Like I was put under some pressure in this game, in some moments, at least like here. And it turns out I held my own. Okay, I'm not going to look at the next game because it was just a horrendous defeat out of the opening with the black pieces. But I can look at the last game, which is also not that great or fun, let's say, but it's interesting. So I decided to go for the exchange French against this grandmaster. Finally, I'm playing up because I just wanted to make a draw. You can you can say whatever you want. Sometimes I also judge people that do that, but in this specific game, I just wanted to make a draw and get out of there. So I looked a bit at this stuff. He hadn't played c5 before, but I expected it, because going for the isolated queen's pawn type position is a typical thing that high-rated players try to do, or sometimes try to do, in order to get, a game, let's say, get an interesting game, get winning chances. I went for this move c3, which I picked up in some chorus. He goes bishop e7. This already I didn't expect, because after bishop e7 takes, we're going into the same position, but he's down a tempo, right? He's down this tempo, which is quite useful for me. So I thought that if we got here, he would go for like c4. And now the line went, was it check immediately or bishop c2 first? I can't quite recall. I believe it was check first. And there was, for example, there was some possibility of going into some endgames like this, and I'm quite happy there. Okay, instead we go for this. And the thing that annoys me most about this game is that I was playing all the natural moves and suddenly look at my position and just have a horrendous looking position and situation. And I couldn't understand for the life of me why that happened. So of course here I could take with this pawn. I mean, I don't know, maybe I should have done it since I just wanted to beg for a draw. But I was trying to think about these positions and I wasn't finding them that appealing, I gotta say. Because the same thing that happened in the game would happen here. My knight is just stuck forever defending against this mate, this mating threat, and I couldn't really see like what my game plan was. Computer just calls it equal. But it also calls what I did equal. But I was already burning a lot of time here because, for example, I can go f4. It's it's a compromising decision to once and for all blunt this battery here. But again, it's very committal. It's very committal, you know. This horse, he isn't going anywhere now. I went knight f3. Maybe f4 would have been a better practical choice. Computer says knight f3 is best. But after rook e8, the truth of the matter is that, dude, he has too much freaking manpower around my king already. And I was getting so flustered here because I just got out of the opening, like, there's no way I can be worse already. But I was even thinking that I'm, you know, sometimes just lost here. Like, because you start looking for moves and there isn't anything to do. Okay, computer apparently says one of these moves is just equal. Even though he also points out that it's getting hit with bishop h3, like right in the face. And, you know, this is just a draw apparently, but good luck calculating that out. I mean, I've seen so many of these positions where black can sacrifice and maybe go for some check, rook swing, and win immediately. Also, he of course doesn't have to pull the trigger right away. He can go like rook e6 or just prepare it. So I felt like that I had to do something. I went c4. Okay. Even here, I had to calculate quite some things like this, all sorts of stuff. And the one thing I missed is exactly what he played, which is d4. So I saw this only after I had played, while he was thinking. So of course I cannot, even poor cat is dissatisfied with this position. So of course I cannot attack with the knight again because of this, because of the mate. I decided to take on e4. Why? Because if I take on d4, he has this stupid knight g5. And he's just simply distracting my knight. And I can't do anything about it, okay? Because I cannot cover up the diagonal. So I take here. And, you know, I was kind of under the impression that this was winning for him, but eventually I think I was going to go for queen c2. So the main line I was calculating, apparently this queen c2 loses. Which, okay, I kind of suspected as well, but what can you do? Anyways, here, this is the main thing I wanted to do, but after bishop d5, e2, it looks rather threatening. For example, rook e1, bishop b4, game is over. No, actually not, sorry, this is the main line. This is the line where it's not over. Where it is over is like rook c1, and maybe even here it isn't over. I'm not really sure. But anyways, the main line that I was considering that my friend after the game told me that was possible was this. And then basically even though this pawn looks super scary, it's not queening just yet. And I'm trying to go a3, b4, and then, you know, go for this slow rounding up of the pawn. Okay, you can't be sure at all during your chess game that you're going to be able to take the pawn or if it's just going to queen. Anyways, he took here. He took here, allowed me to take, goes for knight g6. And for a lot of time in this game, I was putting up very good resistance. So I noticed from some moves ago that I had this resource here with knight e5, because otherwise he's just murdering me with all these bishops looking at my bear king. Knight e5 is a fun looking move. Okay, the point is that the queen is hanging. If he takes, I have some motifs looking at the back rank. If he takes with the rook, well, it's the same thing but worse. So what he does is he takes here and goes, and by the way, just something else, like if queen, I thought I was gonna go queen f5 here, but what was I gonna do? I think I was just gonna go back or something. Maybe my idea was just go back. I can't recall. Okay, he could take here, so he gets his pawn back, but I at least transferred my bishop over to defend my king. Bishop f5, and here again, I believe this was another good move by me, rook e1. Because you know what? Even though the opposite colored bishops have a certain tendency to go for drawn positions, the fact that my king is just weakened by the absence of the h-pawn is really significant here, okay? And he just has this simple barbaric plan of going h5, h4, removing the bishop from here, and then going h3, you know, going all the way to touchdown, and just murdering my poor king. So rook e1, I think, was a very nice resource. Okay, I'm giving up the pawn for activity. And here I was gonna go queen b3, I believe. was it queen b3 or was it? Yeah, I think it was. I think I was even looking at this. Queen b3 attacking these two. He would go queen c6, and our rook e7 was a move that I was kind of enjoying. Again, threatening this one. You know, sneakily threatening this one in some cases, and setting up rook c7. So I felt that this was a very nice chance. For example, rook c1, take. Please, cat, don't eat the mouse cable. King h2. And now these two are hanging, and okay, we can get a draw like this, which would be a good result for me, for example. So instead he goes rook g4, a very nice move, which I missed. Takes a really strong guy, let me tell you, to stay away from taking the pawn, just going somewhere else. And again, he has this threat of h5, h4, really hard to parry. I decided to give up a pawn again, and I was scared for my life that he would go bishop e6. Well, that's just an expression, but I thought bishop e6 was really the way to go. You know, again, refraining from the immediate temptation and going, just running down with the pawn. Instead, he cashed in a pawn here. And now we get this sort of phase of the game. I'm going through it very fast because nothing is happening, where I'm down a pawn, but the presence of the opposite color bishops should make this a drawn position. And okay, I'm aware of that, but what I'm not aware of is exactly how I can make the draw. Because here, when we get to this situation, he has the very simple threat of going h3. I take, and then he takes on f3, and he's gonna win stuff. He's gonna win the pawn, all the pawns, and the, you know, 2-0 is already too much of an advantage. Unless you're playing Argentina. If I go rook e3, I defend against this one, but then comes the other pawn. And I thought this, I mean, again, I thought this was a draw for sure, but I couldn't figure out exactly how. I couldn't find a way to stop his threats. So I went rook h1. Ridiculously passive move, but, you know, again, sometimes you have to make hard choices. If you can't see how he can break through, you have to just play it and pray for the best. Turns out he wasn't really finding the best way because he goes rook d5, which might mean that he couldn't see something else. And now, unfortunately, I blundered heavily, throwing away all of my previous efforts. So I got hasty, tried to trade the rooks off. If you don't know, these kinds of endgames are infinitely easier I mean, it's much easier to make a draw with no rooks on the board than with rooks. Unfortunately for me, this loses for a million reasons. The first, as a friend of mine pointed out after the game, is bishop f3. Okay, none of us patsers saw this crap. This just wins on the spot. Takes h3. Nice little tactic. The bishop cannot stop the pawn in time. that was honestly really easy. But of course, my opponent had foreseen that he had this option to go for this, which I also missed. What did I see is the question, right? Not what I missed. There's so many things I missed. And here he's just grabbing this one. And okay, here he stalled out the game for like all eternity. But the truth is that it was always lost. It was always lost. And I never really stood a chance. I'm not sure what took him so long, but eventually, I mean, the bishop is kind of stopping these pawns, but what happens is that he eventually, I don't know why he went a3, but he can just go like king c4 and just run the king over to this side like this. And sorry, yeah, king e2 is not possible. So I don't really have a freaking move here. Let's say I wait, he goes king e4. If I don't do anything, he's gonna promote with the 8 of his king. So I have to go like king e1. And okay, he just pushes this pawn with I was trying to exactly figure this one out, but like king f3, and this will be winning. He gets the bishop around, pushes the pawns. Okay, but what he played is winning as well. Also very instructive. a3. Are you taking, Patzer? Don't take, Patzer. Come on, you're better than that. This is a complete draw. This is a bulletproof fortress. There's no way to break through this because my king will not allow his king to help the pawn push forward, but instead king c3. Clever move. And it turns out that in these endgames, this pawn doesn't matter at all, okay? Because the bishop easily catches it. while what matters is that my king is completely boxed out. So he just runs, pushes this one forward, and the bishop goes around, catches this one, and the game's over. So I resign. I was, again, putting up a lot of resistance. This was like a valiant effort by me, but the truth is that he was just better, and I blundered really hard here with rook d1. That was unfortunate. So that was the last game that I played. I ended up playing 5 games, as I said. This video turned out to be a bit longer than I wanted it to, but that's fine. I guess I just have to recap less games, but I think it was rather fun. In terms of my, okay, I lost like 3 rating points or something. So basically, as we say in Portuguese, like I just stayed at home in terms of the rating. The overall experience was great, really fun tournament. And in terms of my personal stuff, I didn't really play that well. I mean, actually, I should reframe that as something else. I think I played better than I gave myself credit for. Let's put it that way. So I look at these games, for example, against the low-rated guys, even against this high-rated player, and I didn't play that badly. I was having some ideas. I was having some defenses against the lower players, some attacks, some ideas to win. And overall, like, my confidence was too low for it didn't have to be that low, is what I'm trying to say. And okay, at least I didn't feel particularly like super flustered or angry or anything after the losses. I took it gracefully, and I feel like that's a step in the right direction. So we'll see what comes up in the upcoming tournaments. I'm having a tournament coming up in like a week and a half, sort of. And that's an individual tournament, so there's less pressure and everything. So let's see how that one goes. So that's all for me today, guys. Peace out. I'll see you soon.